Hello JBS viewers, I'm David Harris and welcome to the ISGAP Hour. I'm sitting here at the University of Oxford, this iconic setting, during a 2-week-long seminar hosted by ISGAP on contemporary anti-Semitism, how to better understand it and how to better teach it in the universities. And speaking of universities, our guest for this segment is Professor Dyanne Martin, a professor of English at Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois, and a person whom I've gotten to know with a rather remarkable story to tell. So stay with us and you'll see why. Welcome.
Thank you, David.
I have to ask you, I'm looking at your earrings and I'm seeing something which I hope the viewers are also able to see. Stars of David, why?
It's an outward symbol of my inward heart. And so it's my way of signaling to the Jewish people that I stand with them, that I am an ally, that they are supported, that there are people who love them simply because of who they are, not because it's some kind of self-serving love or appreciation, but just recognizing the many incredible, wonderful contributions that Jews have given to the world, not the least of which is a moral law and a moral code. The ideas, the values of justice and goodness and kindness and democracy have come down to us through Jews. And so I want Jews to be able to know when they're, I know it's a time of isolation and people feel so alone. And if wearing these earrings helps somebody feel encouraged, then I wear them proudly.
Well, it certainly makes me feel less alone. When did this begin? Did it begin in childhood? Did it begin in the home? Or was there some moment later in life? It's a long story.
It's a long story. English teacher has to be short.
But this is TV, so it's got to be.
It's going to be short. I became conscious of a deepened interest in Judaism and Holocaust literature when I began teaching out of my bachelor's degree. I was teaching 10th grade English in a high school, and I was required to teach the book Night by Elie Wiesel, and it revolutionized everything about the way I thought. It was a deeper introduction to the horrors that have been inflicted upon the Jewish people, and so I wanted to know more. And I had always been drawn to Judaism, like what is it and what the story of the Jewish people. I'm a story girl. I'm a teacher of literature. I love story, and so the Jewish story is so compelling and so powerful and so inspiring. I wanted to know more, and so I applied to and was accepted to a Holocaust Institute at the University of Miami with Dr. Miriam Klein. I forgot her last name. It's been like 30 years. So. And I thought, I had done all this research to teach night, and I thought, wow, I really know what I'm talking about with the Holocaust. And I took that institute and found out I knew nothing. And so learning from Dr. Miriam Klein-Kasanoff and her colleagues helped me really enter the space of historical anti-Semitism and where it originated, what it meant, and how it manifests itself today. And so from there, I went on to do a master's degree and wrote my master's thesis on how to teach Holocaust literature. And then I did a PhD in comparative literature, primarily focusing on Caribbean, I'm from Jamaica, on Caribbean literature and rhetoric and African American studies, and always keeping my Holocaust literature component kind of as a parallel track. But then I came to ISGAP in 2021, and teaching Holocaust literature became more than a side passion for me. It changed the focus of my career, really, and of my research and my scholarship. And I became so embedded in this search for the causes and for the solutions. Like, what can we do, Jews and non-Jews alike, what can we do to offset these horrible manifestations of anti-Semitism in our contemporary realm? And so that's kind of what got me started. And then interestingly enough, I found out, I was complaining to my father about my name, it's Dyanne, and I said, Daddy, why couldn't you just spell it like a normal person? And he said, well, I named you after the Israeli general Moshe Dayan.
Wow.
And I said, Dad, I love my name now.
So you have the Y in there also.
I have the Y in there also. And then I found out after that, I did an ancestry DNA test and found out I'm 3% Ashkenazi Jew.
3%.
And my mom is 6%. So it all just works together.
Dyanne, many are concerned that teaching about the Holocaust, whether through literature or history today, becomes harder and harder. First of all, we're told kids don't like to read as much as they did. Kids are more ahistorical. The events happened 80 to 85 years ago. What's been your experience at Wheaton College teaching about the Holocaust in today's world?
Wheaton College has been very generous to provide me a platform to teach my class, and they don't restrict how I teach it. I'm very grateful for my administration. They're very supportive, and my deans and whatnot, my chairs. What I do in my classroom, because Holocaust education done poorly actually makes things worse. Dara Horn has Dara Horn has wonderful articles about this, and she discusses how if you just make it another ism, it's just one of many prejudices. It's just one of many forms of racism. There's nothing peculiar. There's nothing specific, particular about anti-Semitism in relation to the Jewish people. Then it gets lost in the mud. It gets lost in the wash. And so Holocaust education, whether you're doing it from a historical standpoint, a political standpoint, for me it's a literature standpoint, but the literature brings in the politics and the history and the government and geography and everything else. If you do that thoughtfully and with intentionality, you will find that students respond. You're absolutely right in that too many students no longer like to read. It's very much an internet culture, and they've moved away from books. But if you choose wisely short pieces that are powerful, that will have the most impact on that particular audience in your classroom in that particular semester, because the zeitgeist changes, right? So as the zeitgeist moves, you move with it, and every semester I change the readings on my syllabus. What I taught last semester is not what I'll be teaching in next semester. I teach that class in Prague in the fall for a semester abroad program. So I have one fewer week. So I've eliminated a couple of books. It forces me to be very, very thoughtful and reflective about which books are going to have the most powerful influence on these students with this issue. And then I do the same thing with the secondary articles. I do the same thing with the films. It forces me to really be very specific and intentional and concise with the most powerful resources to help students be engaged, be interested, be willing to read, and be wanting to have those discussions.
And there are examples of success in your experience?
There are examples of success. I have seen students, a year ago or in December, a student had never heard of 10-7 until he took my class. And he took,
so even a year and a half later,
yep.
they had not heard of it.
When school started in August of 2024, he had not heard of 10-7. And he's a very bright, capable student. He's an amazing young man. And it's not because he's not smart, it's because no one's talking about it.
Wow.
And so he came to my class and learned all the way back to Egypt, all the way up to 10-7. And it motivated him to want to become a strong ally for Israel. He's an intern in the Senate. He's going to law school, he wants to be a politician. And so here's a young man who's now recognized the history and the truth about Israel, who has decided to put aside the false narrative and instead to invest himself and his life in allyship for what is right, what is true, and what is good. And that is for Israel to have, it's a tiny little sliver, let Israel have a state, let them have a country. He is so excited about his new advocacy for Israel that he actually wrote a letter to some of the not actors, but the people in the October 8th movie to say to them, I want to come alongside and help you. How can I do that?
Wow. You are a person of faith, I've come to understand, of deep faith. But in your faith, you also understand that the Christian role in anti-Semitism was not negligible and was not episodic. It was quite consistent for centuries. So how do you, as a scholar and a person of faith, reconcile that belief with that history?
So one of the most insightful statements, very simple statement that someone said to me when I was a very, very long time ago, when I was just a young Christian, the person said, don't judge Jesus by his disobedient children. Don't judge Christianity by the disobedient people, by the people who have moved into heresy. You judge Jesus' teachings by Jesus. Well, if you're really calling yourself a Christian, then you're saying to the world, I believe what Christ taught. Okay, then what did Christ teach? Well, he taught the opposite of what too many anti-Semitic Christians are saying he taught. And then people don't read for themselves, so they just believe what they hear instead of going to look at the actual words. One quick and very simple example, the deicide charge has been flung at Jews for centuries. It's one of the reasons we see that trope continuing on today. It's been propagated by the church over and over and over and over again. Well, if you say you believe in Jesus, Jesus literally said himself, not like Paul said it about Jesus, Peter said it about Jesus. Jesus said, I lay down my life of my own accord. No one takes it from me. I lay down my life. So that's agency. So there goes deicide, right? So if you are a Christian and you say that you believe Christ, then really look to see what he said about Jews and about Israel, because he had a lot to say, and so did the Apostle Paul, who says, I am a Jew. First and foremost, I am a Jew. We love to forget that Jesus and all of his apostles were Jewish. We forget that without Judaism, there is no Christianity, that Jesus was a Jewish rabbi. So for me, it's not looking at all the horrible people who have done the bad things, because there are millennia worth of people who have done that, calling themselves Christians. For me, it's looking at Christ himself and what he teaches. What does Jesus say about Jews in Israel? What does Jesus say about loving my fellow human being? What does Jesus say about goodness and charity and kindness and discipline and love and self-control and truth? Those are the things, if you're calling yourself a Christian, you need to focus on and practice in your daily life. So for me, I don't feel cognitive dissonance. I don't feel that tension between the horrible history of anti-Semitism in the church and my faith, because my faith is not contingent on human beings and what they did in the past or today. My faith is contingent on what the Bible tells me I'm supposed to believe about Jews, Israel, and everybody else on the planet.
So I'm guessing that some JBS viewers watching this interview will say, well, this is terrific, but there's always a but. And the but is, but some Christians believe in an eschatology, an end of day scenario, and if they're being nice to Jews, it's only to fulfill that prophetic vision, or they're saying, they're saying, Dyanne Martin is wonderful, but she's the minority, not the majority in the community, who confronts the history and kind of puts the history in its place in the way you did. How do you respond to those people?
Those people do exist, but I think they're the minority, not the majority. I have not done statistical research on that, but just from my general experience moving in Christian circles for the last 30 years, that has not been my experience. It's been the opposite. There are, of course, some people who believe that they're moving towards an eschatological relationship with how they perceive their allyship or alliance to Jews. But then you have almost 11 million other Christians who belong to, for example, one organization, Christians United for Israel, has almost 11 million people, more than 11. And those people are made up of many, many, many different sects in Christianity. It's not just one. And they're not there because they believe, if we're nice to Jews, it'll help fulfill end time prophecy, or any other self-serving reason. They love Jews because God loves Jews, and they love what God loves. And so God made Israel, God formed a nation, God said, you are the apple of my eye about the Jewish people, and authentic Christians love what God loves, whether that's an abstract quality like justice or love or truth, or whether it's a very concrete thing like the Jewish people. And so you have far more of those people. They're quiet, they're kind of like the silent majority. You have far more of those people in my experience than you do of the people who have some kind of self-serving motivation to be an ally, or to pretend to be an ally to Jews.
And what about the perhaps not new but more visible phenomenon of Christian nationalism that we see from perhaps people like Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson? How significant a force is that, and how much, again, should Jewish viewers worry about that?
I think it is a significant force for evil. I think the statements being made from those parties in those areas are more than deeply problematic. They're more than anti-Semitic. It's Jew hatred. It's fueled by Jew hatred. And unfortunately, the followers of those people don't see clearly. So although that is dangerous, what gives me hope is there are far more people with just as much cultural capital, just as much visibility on the other side who are saying the exact opposite. And it's not a he said, she said, it's you said, here are the facts. You said, but here's the data. So what we've moved away from in our culture, unfortunately, is facts. We've been told that feelings matter more than facts. And that's dangerous when it comes to Jews.
And your facts are not necessarily my facts anyway.
Right, and then what is a fact, right? So we're in a place culturally that's deeply disturbing because of that. And up is down and right is left. And so there are people, really prominent people, who are doing the work to offset those voices on the other side, those Christian nationalist voices, who are saying, actually, no, this is the truth. These are the facts. Here's the data. Let's just take, for example, the New York Times photo that they had to retract because it was, propaganda.
The child,
the supposedly starving child who actually is not starving, and his brother's perfectly healthy. He has a disease, and I believe Israel flew him out to get treatment. And the New York NYT, after, 5 days, I don't know what it is, had to retract it. So
by the way, with a relatively weak retraction, if one reads it carefully.
But that's always the case, right? It's the lie is page 1 and the retraction is page 52, right?
Right.
And so that's where we need those amplified voices who see the truth or see the retraction and bring it to the fore. So those of us who are in positions of not power, I know that's a very dangerous word in our culture, power, but those of us who are in positions of visibility, right? So you have a Douglas Murray, you have all the other people you have people like Jonathan Kornikos and Miri Eisen. Those people have very highly visible platforms, and they are able to bring the retraction to the fore and say, hi, P.S., by the way, we have people who are doing a wonderful job on social media, which is, that's kind of where this young generation lives, is social media. They're not really so much watching CNN or Fox News. They're getting their news feed from Instagram or TikTok.
Right.
So you have incredible influencers on behalf of Israel all over social media who every single day are out there posting the facts and the story, the true story, the right story, because people say, Israel is losing the war of narrative, because Israel is focused on keeping Jews alive, because Israel is focused on logic and truth. The other side is focused on lies and squishy feelings. Well, Proverbs tells us the heart is deceitful above all things. You can't go by your soft, squishy heart. You have to line up your soft, squishy heart with the facts. Facts matter. So I think what gives me hope is all of the people on the other side who are taking a stance and making themselves visible at great cost to themselves. I mean, you should see some of the comments these people receive, the death threats these people receive. I understand, when I was walking through the airport, I have a Star of David on my necklace, and I'm walking through the airport thinking, am I going to be targeted because I'm wearing this? That's how Jews feel every day. They're afraid to show visible signs of Jewishness because will I be targeted? Will I be lit on fire as I walk through the park in Colorado? Will I be shot dead as I come out of the museum the function in Washington, D.C.? Yeah. Like, is it really safe to wear visible signs of my religious or ethnic or indigenous identity? So in a very, very small way, I understand the fear that permeates the Jewish community because of the lies that are being told in our culture today.
So you're on a campus, and lots of the conversation in ISGAP and beyond is about what's happening on campuses. Mm-hmm. In that respect, is Wheaton College different from other campuses? What's the atmosphere like? How are people like you received wearing Star of David earrings and the Star of David on your necklace? Do you feel safe?
I do feel safe at Wheaton College. I don't feel safe doing it in Chicago as a whole. But at Wheaton College, I do. No one says anything at all, neither good nor bad. No one says anything. There's no comment. So I feel I'm very blessed to work on a campus where, no school is perfect. Every school has its issues. But even so, I am not in fear for my life. I'm not in fear of being set on fire or shot. People might say bad things about me. Well, go ahead, sticks and stones.
But you can teach what you want?
I can teach what I want. My administration is very supportive, not only of my class, I'm very grateful to them, They are also supportive of an initiative to bring a Center for a Study of Holocaust and Antisemitism to the campus. So we are working really hard to try to make that a reality next year. And my provost is behind it and was enthusiastic about it. So I'm very, very blessed to work in a place where, even though there are bad actors on campus in different areas, students or whatever, people come from different walks of life and different philosophies and philosophical ideologies. My administration is kind and supportive about the work that I do on behalf of Israel.
So let's go into your classroom for a moment. Have you had students who have pushed back, or who have challenged? And just give us an example of how you've handled that, and perhaps an example that was successful.
Sure. I always have students who push back because
you invite it.
I invite it, and I tell students every day. I'm not exaggerating when I say in every class I say to students, we're not here to agree with each other. You do not have to agree with me or with the people around you, but we need to engage in respectful discourse. So as long as we are engaged in respectful, courteous discourse, I'm fine. Your grade is not going to be affected because you disagree with me. So I invite the tension. But even when you do that, the students who get so I have students say things that aren't true. And I won't say that's not true, I'll ask a question. So for me, asking questions helps students find their own way more times than not. But one day I did say to a student, he asked a question and he said, what do you think so-and-so would say about this issue? And I said, well, I think he would say, we care about all the indigenous people except Jews. Why don't the Jews get their indigenous land? Why do we care about, we give these statements whenever we have a meeting in LA, land acknowledgements, but we don't do that for Jews. So, and then the student gets upset and it's like, oh, you say that we could ask anything, but then you shoot us down. I was like, you asked me my opinion, I give you an answer, that's not shooting you down. So sure, I have those. You're always gonna have somebody in the room who can't stand you or whatever. I'm fine with that. Don't go into teaching if you have thin skin, right? It's not for the thin-skinned. Your self-identity better not be in what your students think of you if you're going into teaching. But then that was 1 out of 25. But then you have 24 who are writing the most beautiful essays and poems about Jews and God and Israel and how they have now learned the truth about the history and how can they be better advocates and allies. And you read those and you cry. They bring tears to your eyes because those kids are the future. I am not going to be here. Like, my parents died at 85. I think maybe I've got 23 more years or whatever it is, do the math. I'm not going to be here a whole lot longer in the grand scheme of the world, the existence of the world, but those kids have another maybe 60 years ahead of them,
Absolutely.
Right? So it's important to reach this generation with the truth and to help them recognize that you have to line up your squishy heart with the facts. You can't let your squishy heart change the facts, right?
That's a great quote from this interview that I hope many viewers will repeat. We just have a couple of minutes left. I want to discuss Israel, but not in the geopolitical sense. You've been to Israel. You've seen the depiction of Israel in the media, the demonization of Israel too often. You mentioned the New York Times. Tell our viewers the Israel that you've seen and not the one that the New York Times reports. What's that Israel?
The Israel I want to move to, and if I could, I'd move tomorrow. Israel is so far from apartheid, it's laughable when that charge is leveled at Israelis. Israel is a country not only they took a desert and made it a beautiful, fruitful land. But it's not only fruitful in terms of its topography, it's fruitful in terms of its ethnicities. You see Jews and Muslims and Christians walking on the same streets and greeting one another politely. I think particularly of the Port of Jaffa, where you have all of these three groups. They all come together in a really beautiful way. The Muslims are saying Shabbat Shalom, and the Jews are saying Salam, and everybody's saying Merry Christmas, and it's all working together. So Israel is a place not only of ethnic diversity, where Arabs have full and equal human rights, unlike the Arab states surrounding Israel, where women have full and equal human rights, unlike the Arab states surrounding Israel. It is a place of hope and faith and resilience. It is a place that is, you can feel there is something special and something different. I'm not surprised everybody's fighting over Jerusalem. There's something very holy and special about Jerusalem. You can feel it. I have a bag, I'll end with this. I have an amazing tote bag that my guide, Shira, she was amazing, gave me. And the reason she gave it to me was it says, bring them home. And it has a picture of I think it's the anemone flower. It's found in the south of Israel, down by where the kibbutzim were attacked. And I said, Shira, I have to have that bag. Where did you buy it? I'll take you, Dyanne, I'll take you. Well, she took me, but they didn't have them anymore. She's been carrying that bag since October 7th. It's been all over Israel. She said, I got you. And on the day I left, as we went to the airport, she gave me her bag that she's been carrying. And that's the spirit and the generosity and the heart of the Jewish people. And she said, I'm so sorry, it's dirty, it probably smells. I said, Shira, I will never wash this bag. It has been with you all over Israel since 10/7. I will never wash this bag. It's more meaningful to me because it's dirty. And so that is the perfect representation of what Israel is like. It is full of a people who are generous and loving and kind, who care about their fellow human beings, and they're being so maligned in the media and also in the culture that once you actually boots on the ground get to Israel, you can only cry.
Wow, I can only hope, JBS viewers, that your next trip to Israel is very soon, especially after hearing from Dyanne. Or perhaps you'll have a chance to visit Wheaton College and have the privilege of having you, Dyanne, as a professor. I can't thank you enough for this interview, but even more for your friendship and your spirit and those earrings of yours.
Thank you.
One of the speakers this year, actually for the very first time, is the gentleman Rick Sopher. He spoke earlier to the larger gathering of some 100 people here, and I have to tell you, without exaggeration, there was an extremely warm reception. And now we want to introduce Rick to the audience, and you'll see exactly why he got such a warm reception. Rick, welcome to the ISGAP Hour.
Thank you so much, David. Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure. Rick, since many viewers may be meeting you for the first time, maybe you say a few words about yourself.
Well, probably I shouldn't really be here. I'm a banker by background. And I fell into in the last 10 years, into looking at how the Qur'an and the Torah, the Bible, relate to each other. And people then asked me, why did you get involved in that subject? And I had to backfill. And the answer is probably that our family was Jewish people, probably living in Iraq for 2,000 or more years. And then all of a sudden that came to an end in a very short period of time, less than 70 years. We and virtually every other Jewish family in the Middle East and Arab countries left. And the question was why? And I wanted to know if the reason was really theological, there was something maybe in the Qur'an which caused that expulsion, or not.
And what authority, if you will, did you have to be able to take on such an immense task of studying the Quran? Do you speak Arabic?
So my Quranic Arabic is now reasonable. It's better than my ability to order shawarmas in restaurants in different places around the Middle East. And so the Hebrew that I know helped a lot. So many words between the Quran and the Torah are cognate. Actually, that's how I started off, because we started translating the Bible, the Torah, into Arabic as a way of getting comfortable with Arabic, and it starts Bereshit bara Elokim, as you know, et hashamayim ve'et ha'aretz, the heavens and the earth, right. And the Arabic would be as-samawat wal-ard, very cognate words for heavens and earth, and so off we went. The Hebrew helped with the Arabic.
So fast forward for a moment to your conclusion after your studies, and then we'll work our way back to how you got there. But I want our audience to understand what's so groundbreaking, if you will, about the work that you've been doing on this subject.
Honestly, I don't believe that my work is groundbreaking because there are academics whom I've gathered together in a forum of which I'm the convener, of academic professors of this area around the world, from California to Abu Dhabi. And we've had them bring their material to the table. I've been able to dictate the subject and they come and debate it in front of me. And by summarizing or extracting ideas that they had, I believe we've been able to bring some very interesting material that's relevant to anti-Semitism or how the Qur'an theologically thinks about Jewish people.
Sum it up, because I want our audience to understand from the beginning, before we delve deeper, what's your conclusion?
The important conclusions are, first, that the Qur'an does not contradict anything fundamental in the Torah. So theologically, it's not attempting to undermine a previous scripture. On the contrary, it reveres the previous scripture of the Torah. And second, I don't think that the Qur'an, and this is somewhat of a subjective personal view, I don't think that the Qur'an requires a perpetual enmity with Jewish people. Yes, sure, it says some things which are very antagonistic to some Jewish people, but nowhere in the Qur'an does it state that this is to be a perpetual state of hatred towards Jewish people.
So now, take us back a bit to the 7th century and your understanding of how this all evolved, because we believe that between 610 in the Common Era and 632 in the Common Era, and between Mecca and Medina, the Quran emerged.
Okay, that's the traditional Muslim understanding, of course, that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad between 610 and 632 CE, initially in Mecca, afterwards, when he left Mecca, arrives in Medina. And the traditional Islamic understanding is that in Mecca there were not so many Jews or Christians, so the Quran talks in very general terms about the previous scriptures, the Torah and the Injil, the Torah and the Gospel, it refers to them as. But then Muhammad arrives in Medina and starts preaching a monotheistic message to the people in Medina who were substantially Jewish. There was a very big Jewish contingent in Medina. And it's there that this great encounter happens between Muhammad, and it's shown in the Quran, and the community in Medina.
So give us some examples of what emerges, and are there differences between what Muhammad was thinking in Mecca before he met the Jews and what he is thinking after he meets the Jews in Medina? Can we see in the Quran evidence of that, if you will, intellectual theological journey?
Well, I believe we can. Now, first of all, many scholars have tried to divide the Quran surahs, chapters, into the ones that were supposedly revealed in Mecca and the ones revealed in Medina. And by looking at what it says about Jews and Israelites in those two categories, you can see some very interesting differences. When it's talking about the Israelites in Mecca, it talks about them as Banu Israel, the children of Israel, very conceptual phrase. When Muhammad moves to Medina, the chapters or the references there talk much more often about the Jews being Yahud, Jews, or Ahl al-Kitab, people of the book, people of the scriptures. And it talks also, I think it's 17 times in the Medinan surahs and only 2 times in the Meccan surahs about al-Torah, we understand to be the Torah, the Bible. So the whole encounter, just through the words that are used to refer to Israelites, changes completely as he comes face to face with them in Medina.
You say that if a close reading of the Quran suggests that there is a certain reverence, even, I think you use the word to revere, there's a certain reverence for the Jews. Could you illustrate that?
I said reverence for the Bible.
For the Bible,
Torah.
I'm sorry, for the Hebrew Bible.
For the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah, I didn't mean Jews as individuals.
We'll come to Jews, but let me first just emphasize, the Quran absolutely reveres the Hebrew Bible, the Torah.
So it doesn't seek to contradict it?
No, let me give you one verse that praises it. The Quran says, Inna anzalna il-Tawrat wa fiha huda wa nur. We, God, sent down the Torah, and in it is guidance and light. Quite a nice verse.
Okay, but does it make any reference to the Holy Land?
So the Quran refers to the Holy Land exactly in those terms, al-ard al-muqaddasa, the Holy Land.
Does it imply or suggest that the Holy Land is connected to the Jewish people, or is it seen more as being taken by the Muslim people, or somehow a universal imagery?
I would say the Quran is quite clear on that. Ya qawmi, it says, O my people, referring specifically to the Ahl al-Kitab, to the people of the book, which includes Jews, Christians. And it tells these people, Udhul al-ard al-muqaddasa, enter the Holy Land, ilati kataba Allah lakum, which God has ordained for you or assigned to you. And so the Quran could not be more clearer that it's talking about the Jewish people going into the Holy Land, inhabiting it. And it even adds, and do not turn back and become losers. It even would criticize them for not being in the Holy Land.
So your interpretation, or the interpretation of the scholars with whom you work, is that in a way that acknowledges the link between the Jewish people and the Holy Land?
Absolutely.
Or is that going a step too far?
No, that's absolutely what it does. And I would say there's no counterclaim to the Holy Land in the whole of the Quran. The Quran never says, God promised it to the Israelites, but now it should be someone else who should be there.
When it comes to the Christian Bible, many Jews have pointed to this notion of replacement theology or supersessionism, that they read the Christian Bible as somehow saying we have sort of leapfrogged and perfected theology, and either Jews embrace it or somehow are left behind to be damned. Is there that same notion of replacement theology or supersessionism in your reading of the Quran?
I don't think that the Quran was supersessionist on the scriptural level. It didn't mean, and it didn't say, that the Torah was to be replaced. It was not the old Torah and now there's now a new Quran. It didn't say that. But I do think it expected the Jewish people of Medina to follow Muhammad and his teachings in the Quran.
But they didn't, in many cases.
Some did and some didn't.
And what happened to those who didn't?
Well, this is not really recorded in the Quran. It's not a history book in that sense.
I understand, but surrounding it, I mean, everything is contextual.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Jews of Medina, presumably among them were those who did not accept the revelations, if you will.
Yeah.
Do we know what happened to them?
Well, you can conjecture because the
Jews of Khaybar.
Right. Well, you can conjecture because soon after there was no evidence of Jewish life in those places. So if they had not followed Muhammad, they either left or were killed or killed in battle or any one of those things which you can read into in the Islamic histories.
Before going further, and in a way asking how that interpretation of the Quran nonetheless has been lost by many in terms of what we face today, what about the Hadith, the many professions of what Muhammad reportedly said, and I think there are a couple of thousand, I don't remember the exact number, but is there something in the Hadith that Jews should either be surprised, pleasantly surprised about, or also concerned about?
Yeah. So the Hadith, this collection of roughly 10,000 sayings of what Muhammad did or was reputed to have done, or things he said or did, is a vast collection covering all sorts of subjects. Before we go there, if it's okay, David, I just should mention something quite important that we haven't said yet, which is that the Quran has anti-Jewish verses.
Well, I was going to come to that, but please.
I think we should, it's important.
Right.
So we don't want to only talk about the nice bits, which is the Quran talking about how lovely the Torah is, but it does also criticize Jews, and we should go there.
Please, take us there.
For what does the Quran criticize Jews? Well, it criticizes them mainly for not following their own scriptures, for backsliding, for not obeying God's laws, for breaking the Sabbath. And it criticizes them in pretty harsh ways. And when it does so, it doesn't talk about all Jews being in the wrong. It talks about some Jews. Most of the time it says some of them are okay and some of them don't follow their scriptures. And it's categorically negative about those who do not observe their own laws.
So now if we may fast forward and leapfrog many centuries, because we are here at a seminar on contemporary anti-Semitism. Yeah. And obviously we cannot talk about contemporary anti-Semitism anywhere in the world today without also talking about the attempt to invoke Islam by some, call them jihadists or others, including attempts to invoke the Qur'an and other holy teachings in their struggle against the Jews and against the Jewish state. So what happened between then and now?
A lot happened. I find it extremely hard to relate the contemporary discourse about Jews and about the Holy Land with anything that I read in the Quran. I mean, let me take one simple example. We spoke earlier that the Quran mandates the Israelites to go and occupy the Holy Land, Al-Ard al-Muqaddasa. How can you square that with from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free? I don't see how you can hold that a contemporary trope if you know the Quranic verse.
Does that mean that those who teach the Quran today are perhaps weaponizing it? In many cases, obviously we can't generalize.
Unfortunately, people just use scripture selectively. Let me just for balance also mention that the Hebrew Bible does not give the land, the Holy Land, to the Israelites and the Jewish people exclusively. On the contrary, it says it talks many provisions about the ger who lives amongst you, how you should treat them and so on, equal laws for one and for the other. And yet, many people claiming to be religious in Israel today, you sometimes hear that they are saying that this land is ours, get off our land. Well, that is, to my mind, as anti-biblical, just as from the river to the sea is anti-Quranic. The scriptures say the opposite of what these people are claiming.
Right. I think some might push back a bit and say, well, one has become a mainstream view in many places, from the river to the sea, and the other, while it exists, is a much more marginal view. But let's ask the question, those who say that Muslim tradition depicts Jews as the sons of apes and pigs. Where does that come from? Is that accurate, inaccurate? Tell us.
That's a great question, because indeed the Quran does call Jews apes, and in another place it calls them pigs. So why does it do that? So the apes verse comes from the Quran's criticism of the Sabbath breaker, the Jews who were Sabbath breakers. Where does it get that idea that some Jews were Sabbath breakers? Gets it from the Torah. The Quran only calls them apes and pigs. Nasty, not very nice to be called an ape and a pig. Okay?
Oh, no.
But let's compare that to what happened to these Sabbath breakers in the Bible. So in the Torah, they find a man who's picking up sticks on the Sabbath. They take him to Moses. Moses does what he normally does, which is to go to God to check what should happen to this person. God sends down the ruling. The community should stone this man to death. And the community, meaning even his brothers and his father and family, should stone him to death. And that is in the end what happened. So I'm just saying, both scriptures are pretty nasty to the Sabbath breaker. The Torah happens to be much more severe in its outcome of the Sabbath breaker than the Qur'an. So I'm just saying you have to see these words. I know it's not nice to be called an ape or a pig in a religious scripture, but well, the Torah account was worse.
I can also imagine some people saying, well, and what about this language about the Jews will hide behind the rock?
Yeah.
Or the leader of Hezbollah saying it would be better if the Jews all gather in one place so we won't have to go. Are these religiously inspired in the minds of, not in your mind or mine, but in the minds of those who speak them, whether they speak on behalf of Hamas or Hezbollah or ISIS or the Iran revolutionary regime? Are they invoking religion in the belief that this is actually what their religion teaches them, or are they simply manipulating the masses?
Yeah. The statement about there's a Jew hiding behind the rock, so come and kill him, kill the Jew, that comes from the Hadith. It's not in the Quran. I don't think...
So one of these thousands of...
It's one of the thousands of things. It is deemed to be an authentic Hadith, but in these things you can search hard enough and you'll find something. And so Hamas
are there contrary hadith, for example, in that respect? I mean, that one is lethal. I mean, it's not just one among many. It's a justification people have used. Could, may I say, responsible Muslim leaders, if they wished, find other hadith which could neutralize?
Yes, they could find that this was maybe relating to the end of days kind of a verse, rather than something that every Muslim had to go out and find a Jew and kill him today, and find other arguments against it. But when Hamas put that in their original charter, I mean, it's a very nasty verse. It's an incitement to great amount of violence.
Yes, it's a license to kill.
Yes, and I can't prove it, but if it's in the Hamas charter and you're in Hamas, and it's a license to kill, yes.
So in our remaining minutes, maybe we focus a bit, Rick, on what happens next in your mind. You've done this work together with a group of scholars. Your conclusion is that, if I can summarize it accurately, if not, you'll tell me, that the Qur'an itself cannot be seen as a book of incitement, if you will, against the Jewish people or the Holy Land. If you gave the same presentation, not to me, but on Al Arabiya or Al Jazeera, if they would let you, what kind of response would you expect? Or maybe you've done that already. I
haven't done that already. We've done presentations in physical forums
in the UK. Here in the UK.
Yeah, in front of Muslim scholars. But of course, the Muslim scholars who come to such a presentation are the ones who are ready to consider such views, and we had a very respectful engagement with them. Of course,
if I may ask, are they ready not just to consider the views, but to repeat the views to their own constituencies?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, a Jew talking to a Jew is obviously important, but not nearly as important as talking to people who have been weaponizing, instrumentalizing, politicizing their interpretation to justify the call for murder.
Well, I don't know if you know, but in the UK earlier this year, we had these accords where 6 rabbis and 6 imams sat down and they made these sort of friendliness accords, reconciliation accords. And the opening of those accords contained scriptural verses like the ones we've been discussing just now, David. And all of those were agreed in these sessions by the imams and rabbis present. But I do recognize that the imams who put their names to such a thing are quite courageous, because there are people in their own communities who do not accept at the moment that an imam should speak to a rabbi at all. And so when you have those kind of people in your congregation, it's quite hard to boldly go out and present such views from your pulpit.
But on the other hand, unless they do, some would say we're stuck in the mud. In other words, we have this information. On the other hand, it's not being widely disseminated or taught, perhaps, at the prominent universities in Cairo and elsewhere. It's not being disseminated on Arabic language television. So what happens next? Who's gonna break the logjam here? Do you see voices in the Middle East, for example, that are prepared to go a step further? Maybe in the UAE, maybe even in the new Saudi Arabia.
Well, I really hope so. But this is all up for play. It's being played out now. It's a kind of a struggle for Islam, maybe a struggle for Judaism as well, but an internal struggle to decide whether these scriptures should be used in an extreme, violent way, or there's a middle ground. And there are fortunately some champions, and my two favorites are Sheikh Mohammed Al Isa of Saudi Arabia and Sheikh Abdullah bin Baya of the UAE, who go out of their way to present what I think is a reasonably balanced approach, which includes respect both for other religions and for the nation state in which you happen to live. And those are very, you could call them moderate approaches to Islam, which, hopefully will be supported by many people and by their own governments.
I was going to say, given the nature of both Saudi Arabia and the UAE, could they step forward as they have without the, if you will, hechsher or the imprimatur of their governments?
Well, it's all delicate, as you know, but both of them are very respected by their own governments.
So, from your perspective, what happens next? I mean, are you writing a book? Are you planning regular trips to the Middle East? Do you have more intention of bringing together rabbinic and Muslim scholars? What's the game plan?
Right.
How do we get this beyond the JBS studio?
Right. I'm writing a book.
Oh, good.
With a Muslim co-author.
Good.
I'm so happy to have this Muslim co-author. It's been a tremendous dialogue on a personal level. We speak every day about the material in the Torah and the Qur'an, connecting the two, and hopefully, all being well, that will come out in about a year's time.
So it's premature to tell our viewers where to look for the book?
It's premature, I'm afraid.
Much less the movie version. And more plans to bring together religious authorities on both sides to try and expand the universe?
Absolutely.
From 6 and 6 to...
Absolutely. I mean, we have ambitious plans on that front, both to feed down the impact of these accords in the UK so that they actually reach a more grassroots level, and also to see if that accord can be copied in other countries.
And I wonder, since we're here in Britain, was there any interest on the part of the British government or even the Royal Palace? Or was this simply a private effort? Because
No, it wasn't private at all. We had the rabbis and the imams for the signing ceremony.
Right.
They all sat down, and then they took the document with them, and His Majesty the King received them in Buckingham Palace, which was a few-minute walk across the park. So you had an amazing situation with rabbis and imams walking together into Buckingham Palace. The King sort of conceptually patted everybody on the back, and they came back, and we gave them a good kosher tea in a nearby house.
So in the scheme of things, as we meet, there are lots of Jews who very understandably are quite dispirited and depressed about the state of the world.
Yeah.
Massive protests from London to New York. Jews feeling quite vulnerable.
Yeah.
In the scheme of things, is there reason for hope in what you found?
I think so. I think what I found is that the Quran was not theologically opposed to the Jewish people, so that so long as they respect their scripture, even if there are many, many more Muslims than Jewish people, you shouldn't be too worried, so long as they're respecting properly their own scripture in that way that I've described.
And so long as they have educators and religious leaders who both share that view and are willing to disseminate that view.
Yes, but as we've demonstrated, it's quite a task, because the current discourse is so far away from their own scriptures.
And yet your own research is quite compelling. So I can only hope, Rick, that you succeed, because what you're addressing is what we all face collectively. all people of goodwill, both Muslims and Jews who want coexistence. So thank you.
Thank you so much, David.
It's a real pleasure to speak with you.
Very enjoyable speaking with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, JBS viewers. This is David Harris for the ISGAP Hour. Looking forward to seeing you again next week.